Hello and welcome to our show, The Awakening, here on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo Network. My name is Tina Huggins, your divorce coach specialist and restorative family mediator, and this is Joe. Our topic today is, why do you stay in an unhealthy relationship? So this is a topic that many people that get divorced could actually put their 2 cents in, because we stay in a relationship that is unhealthy for a long time. I stayed over 15 years, and we're going to find out why I stayed tonight. So I looked up a question on Google. Should I get divorced? And that brought me into lots of different websites that had reasons, a certain number of reasons. Some said 16. There was one that said 18 reasons or signs to get divorced. And so the signs to get divorced aren't necessarily the reasons you get divorced, although they could be. And I can tell you from my viewpoint that I stayed in my marriage for all the wrong reasons. And we're going to find out a little bit about that. So, Joe, you told me when we were prepping, well, you've told me over the whole time that we've been together, that your marriage was on the rocks before you ever even said I do. So why did you stay?
Because there was rails on the boat. Sorry. Golly, why did I stay? Oh, man. For all the wrong reasons. Okay. So I'll start with the best reasons to stay. When I got married, there was a little boy that she had previously. So that was a reason my foot was even in the door. So, and then it wasn't as bad at first. It was still bad. I mean, the red flags and stuff, but it just kept catapulting, getting worse and worse. And why did I stay? I learned commitment as far as like work commitment, your word commitment, marriage commitment, falls in that. My mom and dad were never divorced, married forever till they passed away. So I learned commitment that way. So I'd say commitment, the kind of like the job I have. I've done that 40 years now. So that's commitment right there. So everything I do, I'm just kind of committed to it.
And you're committed to everything. Once you start a project, it's
Right.
kind of hard to pull you away for it. Like just prior to coming to sit down to do the show, he was in the middle of texting at work for work stuff.
Right.
So very committed. So I can tell you that I didn't think I should get divorced. I learned that, I was raised on a farm, and my family just loved my husband. They loved him more than they loved me, to the point that they even took his side once I got divorced. And that was my fault too, because I didn't communicate with them what was going on in my relationship. But I was trained to marry a good provider. So I was basically trained to marry with my head, not with my heart, which can be good and could be bad. And in this case, I was trained to be married to a good provider. I was trained to do all the wifey things, to cook, to clean, to take care of the kids, to run the errands, to do all the work and provide sex for my partner, for my husband. And when I was telling you this, you had a stupid comment about cows.
Sounds like a lot of work is pretty much what I said, but a little bit more flavor.
He called me a cow, I think.
I'm still here.
Yeah, he didn't die. So how did I learn that stuff? How was I trained? I was trained from my parents. I was trained from my grandparents. Basically, my grandparents and probably their parents trained my parents. So my mom was trained by her parents, specifically her mother, that this is what you do. And so my mom and dad met each other. Long story. We'll come to that story in just a little bit, but that whole part of everything that took place in that relationship, from my grandparents to my parents and then to me, was all trained. We were just trained to be and do, and then religion comes into play too. That when you take your vows, which is where your commitment was, that was part of why you stayed so long. When we take vows, we promise God that we're not going to leave that relationship. And then we end up living. How long did you stay in your relationship?
25 years, 24 years, something like that. I lost track. Never really added them up, but that's close.
And I was married for 19 years, but 15 of them were definitely in bad. It was when it started, when my dad got involved because of the farm, when my husband went to work for my dad sat me down and literally pointed his finger at me and said, you are not to have any 2 cents. You're not to go out to the farm. You're not to do anything. I was raised on that farm. I knew more about the horses and cows and tractors than my husband did, in the field. But my dad got his 2 cents in. And like I said earlier, that's when my relationship started to falter and fail. And then it went another 15 years and a few broken bones in the process. So were you unhappy in your relationship?
That's an understatement. Right. It was trying. I went into it very naive. I thought it would get better. Believe it or not. I mean, you wouldn't go into it thinking it's going to stay the same or get worse. So I did think it'd get better, but yeah, not a good deal. So
I can tell you, there's been lots of young women that have come in to talk to me because I was a martial arts instructor. And then I had a clinic in my small hometown where a lot, excuse me, a lot of, especially young girls, but even young men would come in and ask questions to me about different things. And there were several of them through the course of my time that were with an abusive boyfriend, and he asked them to get married. And they told me, they said, oh, he'll get better. Things will just get better. It's just all the tension in his family and stuff from here. Everything's going to get better. I'll make sure it gets better. I'll make sure it gets better. We all think that we can change our partner. We can help them get better. I know a gal several years back where she was dating an abusive boyfriend, and her actual words were, I help him. He can't survive without me. I help him. I do the cooking and the cleaning and things that he can't do. He's not mentally and physically able to do those things well enough for himself. And then that relationship got volatile and ended. And luckily it was before she got married to him. And then there's a book, I can't even remember what it is. I would give this book as a gift, as a wedding gift to a lot of people. Oh, it was Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And I would give that book to people just because it talked about the differences. But I would talk to these young girls and I would tell them, it's never going to get better. It will get worse, but it will never get better. It might get better for short periods of time. Okay, so we're looking at things like addictions. I just heard recently from a person that they were going to get divorced because of the addiction their partner had, their husband had, to porn. And I hear sex addiction and porn addiction as a reason for people getting divorced quite frequently. And it's something that he has. I mean, it's an addiction. It doesn't matter whether the addictions to sex, to alcohol, to drugs, to gambling, those addictions, you can't make them better, ever. It doesn't matter what you do, you can't make them better. They can get help. They can go to AA or Sexaholics Anonymous or any course of those types of things. They can go and get help for their addiction, but you can't change them. And if they aren't willing to go and get that help before you get married, I'm telling you, it will get worse. If they raise their voice at you, eventually they will hit you. If they throw things in your direction, eventually they will hit you. It's a portion of that person needing help. You can't get that help for them. You can do an intervention, but if they have a mental illness, that intervention is not going to help. Okay. And you've experienced a mental situation with your spouse, and she actually intervened in your relationship with counseling, correct?
Right. And she thought she was the victim. So she went out and got a counselor, told them, her particular story, and, laid out the guidelines of how things were in her mind. And then they'd bring me in, she'd bring me into the counseling. And then the counselor, you could just see his wheels turning after a while, and it didn't add up, of course. And that's when the counselor would say, Joe, can you come in and we'll go one-on-one here? And then they would, like say different things. One in particular, they would say, and I've said this before on other broadcasts, but before I met you, I thought you were going to be 6'2", and every time she opened her mouth, you would backhand her. Just stuff like that. So
He's not 6'2". He's
and I haven't hit
5'4".
and a half. But anyways, yeah, we went to counseling, and actually counseling was great. Yeah, I was willing to do anything for my sanity too. That was mainly it, really.
And so that's why he's a perfect man, because he's been through the torture and trained by the therapist. So now he comes to me. So he was a piece of coal,
really,
probably when she met him, but now he's my diamond.
we don't have proof of that.
I don't know.
Hearsay.
You've told me
Hearsay.
Anyways, so these are all kinds of reasons why, we stayed in our abusive relationship. And so in another show, we'll talk about the difference between situational abuse or fighting and abuse. So that's a whole different situation, because I think my situation was situational, where yours was just long-term.
It was a time bomb, and it was a constant. It was like a leaky roof. Yeah.
So now I'm going to kind of tell you a bit of some stuff that I've been through with my father. So I know in my lifetime, my dad, this is kind of where I learned a lot of this stuff, and then part of it come from my mom. So before I start on my dad, I will tell you a little bit about my mom. My mom stayed married to my dad, who didn't start off abusive. In fact, he was a good man. He was financially abusive to her, but I honestly think had he understood that what he was doing was financial abuse, he probably wouldn't have done it. And maybe he learned some of that from his own father, because that is a side of my dad's parents that I didn't see, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Okay, so it was a farm, and they got paid cash for different things like sale of cattle and some farm sales inside the farm itself on the field, where people could come and pay for potatoes and things like that. So they got paid cash for lots of things. And so that cash was kept in my grandparents' safe. And my dad and his siblings, I believe, all had the combination to get into that safe. They knew where their money was, and their money was separate from my grandparents' money. And I don't think my dad would have been financially abusive. But the longer that relationship went, he was never in love with my mom, and my mom learned to love him. And maybe she did love him when she first met him. But what happened is they dated for just a few dates, and I became the product of that. And so they had to get married. And so learning through everything with my mom, she couldn't leave that relationship, even if like my dad stepped out on her, whether he was stepping out with a person or just at the bar. He wouldn't come home for hours and hours after work, after he got out of the fields. And she never went anywhere. Finally, her and her girlfriend would do stuff at either my mom's house or her house, but they would never go anywhere or do things except for maybe twice a year, which was shopping, school clothes shopping, and holiday shopping type stuff. And my mom, finally, I got to learn this. So one day my mom came home, and my mom is the oldest daughter, and the second in her family of 8. And she came home one day after school and found her father straddling her mother with a belt around her neck, just choking her. And I believe that it was her older brother that pulled him off of their mom. But when my grandma was young, a new married woman, she had married my grandfather, and she had the 2 oldest. And so my mom was the second, and she was being abused by my grandfather. And so she left Colorado and went to California, which is where her parents were at. And she stayed there for a month or 2. And then her mother actually told her, "You made your bed, now you have to sleep in it. You have to go back." So she never left again. She was abused many, many times. I know that he took logging chains to the oldest son. I know there was lots of beatings that the oldest boy ended up taking on. He did that to protect my mom and to protect some of his younger siblings. Like I said, there was 8 in that family. And so they did without a lot. He was a coal miner. And so she was told that she had to deal with that abuse because she was the one who made the choice to get married. So she stayed in that marriage until she died. And she died in her mid-50s. And basically she died because she didn't want to live anymore. She didn't want to go through that anymore. So my mom learned that she had to put up with it no matter what. And my dad wasn't abusive, like I said, except for the financial stuff and then verbal stuff and just not showing her any kind of respect. He didn't treat her very well. And he did eventually step out in that relationship. And when he did that, I mean, we kind of knew he was bringing these girls home. He was bringing young women, not much older than me, home to meet my mom with their father, who was a cross-dresser back in those days. So it was a great big old deal in our household. We all thought it was kind of weird. We went to school just kind of scratching our own heads. My brother and I, we were the 2 oldest. I don't think my sister really knew much what was going on because she was younger. And one day it was snowing outside and my dad was gone and said he was out in the field. Well, it was just part of what I did. I followed his tracks to the bar, of which he parked in the back, and I could see somebody else's tracks in the back, followed them, knew it was a woman, followed his tracks, knew it was him, knew when he got there, how long he stayed because of the amount of snow that had fallen that night. He lied straight to my face. Straight to my face. I'm sure if he lied to me, he was lying to my mother. So other reasons to definitely get divorced, but my mom stayed. My mom stayed in that relationship another couple of years after this episode all happened. And then I moved, he left, and then he got married, he got married shortly after my mom. It's what he left her for. And eventually that relationship got volatile. Only this time it was the woman to my dad. She shot at him several times. She ran over him the last time with a dually pickup truck. You've heard me talk about that on a couple of other shows. And my dad's story is totally opposite of what the bruising on his back told me. There is no way that he could have fallen on his back and have tire print bruises on his back at the same time, and no bruises on his chest. So go ahead.
Yeah. So what this boils down to, all these stories, is we lie to ourselves.
Amen.
So if we were truthful to ourselves, I'm sure we'd get help, more than likely get a divorce, because those situations are horrible.
Right. We lie to ourselves.
Yep.
I lied to myself. I
Ditto.
never told my family anything. That's a big no-no. You have to let your family know what's taking place. You have to. They are going to be the ones to help you in the end. So with my dad, anyways, we'll cut this real long story short now. He is with the third abusive woman, where I had helped him get away from the first one, save his farm and do all of that. And how I did that was I picked up a bunch of, I taught self-defense in the battered women's shelter. So I picked up a bunch of the battered women's, I was just going to give those to my dad in hopes that he would notice it. And I happened to read through them, and oh my goodness, she had read through these and was using them to set it up so she could murder my dad and get away with it. I was able to prove that to my dad and help him to get away from that relationship. He married another one that he knew for 2 whole weeks. And they were together just over 2 years, or right at 2 years. And she took him for everything she could. She got him arrested. And while he was in jail, she got him arrested late on a Friday night so he couldn't bond out. And because he had to go through arraignment on Monday. And then I went and picked him up. By the time he made it back, she had sold everything in his house for her drugs, of which my dad knew absolutely nothing about drugs. He had never been around drugs. I mean, he'd been around pot, but coming from a farm, he just didn't hang out with those kinds of people when he grew up. So he got schooled real quickly on what crystal meth was, especially when she started cooking it in the house. Yeah, bad deal. And that night she threw him up against the wall so hard. Well, actually was against a door, and a doorknob hit his kidneys and he collapsed on the floor. I was told for 2 hours I wasn't there. But he lied to me about that injury. He told me he fell down on the bed of his truck, and the ball that they hook up the stock trailers was, because it was a flatbed and that ball stuck up. He said he landed on that ball. So at least he had a story about a knob that got his back, where the other story wasn't even close. But again, it's all those lies. And believe me, I heard horrible stories from police officers that would show up in the yard when my dad wasn't there, and the things that they saw this woman involved with when they pulled into the yard was just crazy. And I told Joe I wasn't going to bring it up because
I don't want to ask.
because it is a story. I don't mind telling the story, but it is something that's quite disgusting.
Right.
And my dad, so she crawled out of a cab over, which is a semi truck with a bed in the back. So she crawled out of that when the cops were in the yard, completely naked. And her 19-year-old son crawled out completely naked behind her. You know, it's those kinds of things, you know, and then my dad actually had the gall to tell me that, well, that's just how she coddles him. I'm like,
At 19.
I was born at night, but not last night. You know, this is just stuff that.
So the moral of the story, you lie to other people too. You don't just lie to yourself. There's no limit, no limits.
Well, and it's just like alcoholics, you know, and Al-Anon. So I helped my mom get into a recovery center, and I had to go through Al-Anon training. And the alcoholic will hide the alcohol so you don't know they're drinking. Well, an Al-Anon person, family member, will hide all the alcohol from the person who's drinking. The drinker lies to you about the alcohol. You lie to them about the alcohol. So it's just a routine. And until you get help or get divorced in this case, nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. So with my dad's relationship, he's now in his third abusive relationship. I got him away from that woman. I actually didn't do much. I couldn't. She had threatened my life, threatened my children's lives. And so we were asked not to come over to my dad's. And I got him through that. Him and I spent quite a bit of time together. And then he got with this woman that he's with now, who is 6 months younger than I am and also abusive, to the part that, and he lies about this part. He says it's the alcohol. If you just don't talk to her when she's drinking, like alcohol magnifies a person.
Right.
It doesn't change them. It magnifies them. So if they're already thinking these thoughts in their head, feeling them, it magnifies those thoughts.
It dissolves the filter.
Oh, yeah, there is no filter.
There's no filter.
And I had to block her. My sisters had to block her. We've all had to keep her away from us. It's like my sister went out to take care of my dad. I went out last year for a whole month to take care of my dad. And my sister went out this year. And my sister only stayed a couple of days because she is physically afraid of my dad's wife. She took a butt of a gun to my son's girlfriend for lying to her and stealing. Not that she didn't deserve some of what, but she broke her scapula, one of the hardest bones. Flat bones are very hard to break. She broke the scapula of her back with the butt of the gun, at the same time breaking the butt of the gun. So you know that she was hitting her extremely hard. So my sister's physically afraid of her. So now that I've kind of explained all of that, we don't go see my dad at all. So where does this take you?
Well, kind of makes my life sound normal. Sorry. Humor is good though, when, but gosh, where does it take me? I had a lot of situations in my marriage. Cops being called all the time, and I say all the time, it was 3 or 4 times, which feels like all the time, because they threaten that the other times when they don't actually call. So, I mean, police showing up at your house in your neighborhood, your reputation is gone, and that's where I learned to kind of like be an open book, because it's like, well, nothing to hide now. So, and the good thing about it is I was friends with all the neighbors. I could talk to all the neighbors. There was 3 of them right in a little triangle right around us, and no problem with me. They never did like her, which
yeah. Talking with everybody I've met, nobody likes her. So right. I get that. And I feel for her because, I can't myself, just like my dad's wife, I really don't dislike her. I don't dislike her. And I know a lot of people are like, why? She's called you a thief, and she's got on Facebook and she's trashed you. When she trashed me, she trashed my kids. She got a hold of them. She got a hold of my ex-husband and threw him under the bus. She tried to get everybody that she could and just kind of trash everybody. Some of my Taekwondo students were involved in that. So we had to. I
don't like her.
So, and I can't say I like her, but I feel sorry for her. And I feel a little bit this way with your ex, because I live a happy life. Mm-hmm. We live a happy life. Right. But I live a happy life. I live happy in my head. And no day do they have a 24-hour happy, awesome day. I mean, I heard stories about your ex when she recently got married 2 years ago, and it was a horrible day. A
bridezilla.
And our wedding was magical. It was my favorite day in the whole world. And it rained. It rained most all the day, except for when we walked.
Right. 15 different times that day. Well, that's good luck. So
When we walked the aisle, it didn't rain.
yeah,
And so all my favorite people were there, and it was magical for me to go through that.
right,
And then with her, it wasn't. It was the opposite of that.
right.
And so living in their head is a really tough thing. So we're going to come back to why we stay in those unhealthy marriages. You know, Joe has repeated several times now that we lie. We lie to ourselves, we lie to others. And so I know I kept a diary. And if you would go through my diaries, you would know that I was messed up in the head, because I would write for 2 or 3 days here and 2 or 3 days in another book, and then I'd come back to this book and then find a whole new book. So you would figure out that I was messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about what was going on in my marriage and how I wanted out. And it was kind of like when I was a little girl, my parents would yell and scream at me, and I would go in the closet. I remember this closet. It had a hole that they had. It was an old adobe house, and it had a hole that somebody had drilled for a cord to come through. So anyways, I would look out this into the horse pens, and I would always say to myself, I wish I was out there. I wish I was out there. Kind of like on Wizard of Oz when she's tapping her little red slippers, trying to get home. That's kind of the way I was there. And so I know that you stayed. And what were some of the lies you were telling yourself, and then the lies you told other people?
I told myself a lie, and other people is the same lie. It was things are getting better, and they weren't. And it's a great thought to have if you could carry through with it. You can't do it on your own, so it takes two people for a healthy marriage. So yeah, I'd say it's getting better, and it's not. So maybe those are words you need to listen to when somebody else that is in an abusive relationship. Or the word fine. If you say fine, I'm fine. Well,
That's what we women do when we're mad. I'm fine.
fine. Fine. So why did I stay? Why did I stay
Well,
there?
what were the lies that
What
you
were the
told? You
lies?
know, you said that was the one lie.
That's the biggest one that stands out. Yeah, like it's just getting better, and it wasn't. I can't think of any other lies that I told myself. I'm sure there's plenty.
So I didn't have to lie to my family. I just bucked it up and dealt with it. I thought that was the way it was. So I didn't even really lie to myself about things. I didn't have to lie to my family because I never told, they never saw. My ex was a great guy as far as the outside view. He was good. He was a great provider. He was always there for my mom. If my mom, he was an electrician, is an electrician. If my mom ever needed anything, he'd be the first one there. She wouldn't even call my brother, because my brother was so involved with his family that she would just call my ex during the time I was married, and then all the time after I left. She would have him over. She gave him special gifts. She did special things for him until she tried to get us back together. She invited him over for Thanksgiving, and it was just me and my two boys. And I'm a martial artist, and I have grappled. And he took me down to the ground, and I chose not to fight. I left it completely alone, but he got me into a tight chokehold, and my youngest son had to pull him off of me. I just left the whole thing. It was my mom's house. I wasn't going to do that. And after he left, she says, "Oh my God, I never saw that side of him." And I'm like, "I told you, that is why I left." This is 4 years after I had left, and she was trying to get us back together. But I had never completely told her enough that she got to see that side of him. After that day, she never called him again for assistance, and he never checked on her again. He'd done what he wanted to do. He was manipulating my family. Even after that, he kept in with my dad and still did manipulation. And would tell dad stuff that he wanted me to hear. So he would do that kind of stuff. And as soon as these women came in and started getting hassly with my dad, then he just kind of stopped all communication, and somewhere in there he actually stole equipment, stole tools and whatnot from my dad. And he actually told me, he said, I'm taking them, or they'll just sell them. If he ever wants them back, he can come get them. And I'm like, yeah, but he doesn't know you have them. And he's like, yeah, but you could let him know if he needs those tools, he can come get them. That's not what he meant. That's not what he meant. He stole
Right.
them because he could steal them.
Right.
And that's the kind of man he really was. He did that kind of stuff to get even. He was getting mad at my dad. So he did that to get even for my dad. So those are the lies I had.
So it sounds like you weren't honest with yourself to tell yourself that you're in a bad situation, to share that with somebody. So you never shared it. So silence was the negative, being silent, not being honest with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't. I mean, even I would just say that we got into fights in my journals, and I would call him in little names, type of thing, or say that kind of stuff. But I never saw that. And I never went back to read my journals. I actually tell people that get a hold of me and say, I can't see the abuse. And I will tell them to journal it, and every month go back and read your journal and see what you have written and connect some dots. I wasn't reading my journals. I would read one passage and then I would probably scribble it out or tear it up. So that is the one thing that you have to go back and do, is read your journals and see what's going on. Years later, I went back through some of those journals and I could see them loud and clear. And I know when I got with you, you were keeping notes.
I had like a half a bag of notes, which is quite a few notes. And that helped get it out of my head and off my heart. Putting it on paper, then you could put it away. And whatever the note says is what it says. You need to, I think you need to write notes and make sure the other person doesn't find them, because then you're going to be in a heap of trouble. So
yeah, that is a huge thing. Keep your notes away. In fact, I would suggest you not keep them in the house if you have an abusive partner. Just because if they find them, and I say this in most of our shows, that the most dangerous time in any relationship is the moment you go to leave, whether that is verbally talking about it or writing about it. That's when I got hurt every time. But it's a fact that the most abusive time is the moment you go to leave. And in my case, I was just leaving fights and ended up with a broken hand and separated ribs and later a dislocated leg. I stayed for 2+ more years after the hand. And
well, and I can vouch for that too. On my side is 2 of the big times I was leaving, she jumped on my back, and actually I was trying to put my pants on so I could leave. And then you're pretty vulnerable when you're putting your pants on.
right.
So I got knocked down, and then I'm holding on to my pants, and then she's dragging me across the tile by my pant leg, and I'm holding on to my pants. And, yeah, I could have let the pants go and beat the snot out of her, but you do that, you're going to be in prison. It's not the right thing to do. It's, so that takes a lot of willpower. But yeah, that was the end days, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
So get the heck out.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
And if you are unhappy, especially if there's any form of abuse, it's not going to get better. You need to figure out a way out. And the very safest way is to create an exit plan. And that's what a divorce coach can help you with, is an exit plan. I work in a domestic violence mediator team where we do lots of training about domestic violence in the mediation process. And that is huge when it comes to understanding how to communicate to other people. And I can tell you, an abuser is one of the most difficult people you can can communicate with. I have a client that I just talked with today that he's got to go through mediation. And so that mediation he thought was going to be virtual and he was safe, but now his wife, his soon-to-be ex, is asking for it to be in the same room in person. And so we talked today about how you can go through the mediation and be in a separate room. And that is a caucus, is what we call it. It's a caucus when the mediator goes from one room to the other. We like to use 2 mediators in those types of situations, just kind of communicate and keep things safe and everything for our clients. So we've come to the end, and I want to know if you've got any more advice that you can give our viewers.
Don't wait as long as Tina and I did in our past relationship. You get I'll call it a rap sheet. You get that kind of history. It's not going anywhere good. So get out, get professional help. So don't keep wishing.
Yes.
Right.
It's not not a good place.
And
to
there's
be.
no easy time to get out. And I'll kind of backtrack just a second and say the easy time to get out is right after a big conflict, but don't wait for that. That's stupid. So, yeah. And then too, with conflicts, a lot of times you go back, and that's not good either.
Yeah.
So
we'll get to a point where we're talking about that kind of
right.
stuff too. So I just want to, I do this at the end of every show. If you are in a violent situation, call 911, get somebody there now. And like Joe often tells you, press charges and don't release the charges. Once the charges are filed, that is your key to get out. Once the charges are filed, as Joe can tell you, that other person is removed from the home. By law, they're removed from the home. And that is the time that you've got to get your P's and Q's and cross your T's and dot your I's all together. Part of your exit plan is complete. Even if you're not going to be the one staying in the home, you've got the home, you've got the access to get all of the documents that you'll need to file for everything. This is the time that the divorce coach can help you. It's the time that we eventually, through this process, we bring in the right lawyer for your situation. And that is an important part. We'll talk about that at some point. But make sure that if you're in a violent situation that you call 911. And if you are in a domestic violent relationship and you just need somebody to talk to, call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 1-800-799-7233. My contact information is my website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. That again is my website, divorcecoachspecialist.com. You can contact me from there, but you can also email me at coachtinalynn@gmail.com. That is coach, CoachTinaLynn@gmail.com. And if you're wanting to reach Joe, you can reach him through my email as well. If you have questions, please ask. And we're here. We want you to be safe and we want you to be happy. That is very important to both of us.
Right.
Anything else?
Stay safe. Don't drop the charges if you file them. So, because that's your safety time.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And we will see you next week.
Good night.